So, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Gordon McNeely, and I'm the chair of the Standing Committee on Health and Social Development. Today is Wednesday, January 29th, and we're just about to begin this meeting. So, just a couple of housekeeping things. Brad Trivers and Jamie Fox are absent. We've got Natalie Jameson and Corey Deagle subbing for them, so welcome. Also, we have Heath McDonald, Hannah Bell, and Trish Altez joining us here today. So we have a presenter today. So before that, can I just get a motion to adopt the agenda? Trish? So we'll move right into it. So our briefing, we're excited to have Tanya Nace here today. So without further ado, she's Executive Director of World Hope International Canada. So we'd like to welcome you, and we're excited to hear about your presentation. So welcome to the Standing Committee, and you can go at your own leisure.
Thanks. It's good to be here. My name's Tanya. I'm from O'Leary originally, so born and raised there. I kept saying to Heath that my dad's Roscoe the Clown. So if you know Roscoe, that would be my dad. Also works at West Isle, Erwin Campbell. This topic is pretty personal to me. I was born with a hole in my heart, and I have an extra heart condition on top of that. So born in O'Leary and spent a lot of time at the IWK and doctor's offices throughout most of my childhood. And so when I just moved back to PEI this summer, I heard about the challenge with physician and medical personnel recruitment and retention. So I kind of started reaching out to people because that's my background, which is something that I enjoy doing. Most of my career has been in the nonprofit humanitarian world, so I've done nonprofit recruitment for my whole career, a lot of which was getting doctors, nurses, educators, engineers to third world countries and war-torn zones. So PEI is not a war-torn zone, thankfully, but my background is helping people get to hard places and helping to make sure that they're successful in landing there well. So I want to talk about retention specifically today. My recruitment work's taken me to more than 20 different countries. In my last job, I oversaw a team of about 50 recruiters across 2 countries. We recruited to 30 different countries around the world, all different types of positions. And I've lived in 3 different ones: New Zealand, United States of America, and the best one, Canada, which has been good. So I'm going to share today a little bit about that. I currently serve as the Executive Director of World Hope. We do health, clean water, and protection work of vulnerable children around the world. So that's what I'm currently doing right now. All right, get this PowerPoint going. Oh, there's my family, my 2 little boys, best part of my life. All right, we're going to talk about these different items today. I'm not going to go through each of them since we're going to jump right in. I want to start talking with you about vision and the importance of vision. So whenever you have vision for why recruitment and retention is important, so much more happens. And the attitude that comes with the recruitment that you do makes or breaks if it's going to be successful or not. I always say a retention plan is a recruitment plan. If you don't have a retention plan, you don't have a recruitment plan. And you're not going to do any good recruiting if you don't have a retention plan. Your retention plan starts at the very first conversation. The very first discussion, the very first interaction starts there, and it goes all the way through and continues on into a successful career on PEI. I always say attitude and narrative matters. How you talk about it, how you are discussing the importance of the position or the need is really important. And we have the best place on earth to live. Everyone wants to live on PEI. Everyone wants to come here, and we have such a great culture and a great community to offer people, and there should be no reason why we can't have doctors and nurses lining up to come here. And the goal with the vision of recruitment that's done well is actually being competitive in the end. So you can't start competitive, you have to build yourself up to that place. But being able to say, we have an amazing thing to offer you, you have an amazing thing to offer us, we're going to have a great partnership together, this is going to work, and then you can start picking who you want after a while, becoming competitive, which is really important in the recruitment world. Cultural intelligence is the most important part of retention. And again, it starts at the very first conversation. So when I say retention, I'm also discussing the entire full cycle recruitment process. Cultural intelligence is the ability to understand different cultures, how you communicate with people, how you discuss things, how you understand them. That is implemented in the entire process, and that's how you can keep people in a place that's harder or different from what they're used to for a long period of time. The posture of the recruiter is really important. Having cross-cultural intelligence for the recruiter is vital. So having a recruiter or a recruitment team who understands cross-cultural communication, they understand what a culture is, what that culture means, how it relates to our current culture, how to connect those together, how to open up the conversation for cultural discussion, cultural understanding, all of those pieces matter. And every time someone has a cultural understanding that's a misunderstanding, they actually start getting things against you. So if you start communicating with a potential doctor or a nurse, and you're not understanding their culture, they're not understanding your culture, every time you misunderstand each other, there's a ding against you. And the more dings you get against you, the less chance you're going to have to get anyone or have someone stay. Whenever someone's coming from a different culture into a new culture, which would be a medical doctor or a nurse or a medical personnel from another place, they have this thing called identity conflict, and that's just this conflict internally to say, I don't understand what you're talking about, I don't understand your culture, and if you're not helping me understand that, it's going to be really hard for us to have a good relationship. So therefore, training, assessments, different types of tools that you can put in your tool belt to be able to move the thing forward is really, really important whenever you're recruiting and retaining people. The definition of culture is basically how you were raised. So, I mean, was anyone here raised outside of PEI? Okay. So you think differently than anyone who's been born on PEI. You think differently because you were raised in a different environment. The way you were raised actually changes who you are. So you had to have a cross-cultural experience coming to PEI, right? And you know exactly what that feels like.
It was a shock.
It was a huge shock, and we're going to talk about culture shock. Absolutely, absolutely. And everyone who's lived on PEI and has never left PEI or hasn't lived outside of PEI, they have a different type of a culture than someone who has. And if you don't understand that, if you don't work inside of that, then you're going to keep misunderstanding each other and you're not going to be very successful in the communication process. Cultural intelligence is a globally recognized way of assessing and improving the effectiveness of working with people from other cultures, and it's all rooted in research, deep studies across hundreds and hundreds of different cultures, and that's the most important part of retention, is having cultural intelligence play a part in every single step in the recruitment process. All right, here we are. Hannah, there's your culture shock scale. So this is what culture shock looks like. There's a variety of people discussing this in different researches. They say it's culture stress versus culture shock, and it's not exactly like this every time, but you kind of come into a new culture and then you hit this honeymoon phase, right? Especially on PEI when it's nice and sunny, right? Oh, it's beautiful, there's beaches, it's amazing, everyone's happy, they're smiling, and then winter hits. You know, it's not always like it that way, but everything's new and exciting. And then you start to realize this is where I am. Like, this is literally where my family is living. This is what's happening. Oh dear, this is crazy. I don't know if I can handle this. And you just hit this down. And it's very, very difficult to come out of that, to come back up. So then you kind of come back up for a surface adjustment. You're starting to process through it. Why do they say things the way they say them? Why do they talk that way? Why do they look that way? Where do you get clothes? Mark's Work Wearhouse, that's not tools, that's clothing. I'm so confused. Like, all of the different things that are happening, they're going through that like confrontation between two different cultures. Then they hit another down, and these downs are very, very hard. They're very, very difficult emotionally, anxiety-wise. It impacts every part of the family. And then you come back up, and that's when you start to assimilate into your new culture. Does that make sense? So you can go through multiple ups and downs. It's not like exact this way. It kind of shows you how culture shock actually works whenever you move forward. There's adaptation and adjustment. It's very important to understand that with retention. So adaptation is actually changing your behavior to match the culture that you're in. And I always say food is a wonderful example because we all love food, right? If you don't love food, then that's sad. So food in PEI is very different than food in India or food in South America or food in the Middle East. So when you come here, you're going through these adaptation processes of changing your behavior. Like, where do I find this type of food? Where do I find this staple that I have always had my whole entire life? How come they store their food in a refrigerator this way? It's not in a box this way. Why is milk not in a box? I'm confused. And why is it in the refrigerator and it's not sitting on the shelf? What? You put it in the fridge? This makes no sense at all. Food is a perfect example of adaptation. So you're changing your behavior. You're going into the store, you're carrying bags to put the food in. Maybe you didn't have to do that where you were from. All of these little pieces build up, and it's adaptation. So you want the highest amount of adaptation to happen, but what normally happens is the adjustment that goes with that is that mental, emotional adjustment to understand all the adaptation that's taking place. So if you have a high adaptation, but your adjustment's negative, so your emotions connected to all of these things are negative, then you're probably not going to stay. You're not going to have a good retaining process on PEI. So when you have a high adaptation happening, but your adjustment is negative, and there's no one to walk through that adjustment, that emotional connection to all of these different things that look and feel and sound so different, if you don't have someone walking through that with you, you're not going to stay for very long. You're just going to give up. So that's the difference between adaptation and adjustment. There's different types of cultures. I want to just show a few here for the fun of it. When you're working with people, you need to understand what culture they come from and what culture you are in. What culture is PEI? So, okay, relationship versus task-oriented. So in O'Leary, where I grew up, whenever you went to the drugstore to get something, you never went to the checkout and just checked out. You always talked about the weather first, right? We talked about the weather when I came in. So you talk about the weather, you discuss the fields, you discuss the lobster, and then you talk about that person's mother and how she's doing and her health and what's going on, and then they actually put the item through the checkout and then you pay for it, right? PEI, that's pretty consistent on PEI, very, very much in rural PEI, right? That's a cultural difference because it's relationship-oriented, not task-oriented. In a large city, it's very task-oriented. You walk in, you check out, beep, 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 you're good, you keep going. You often don't even talk to that person. Two very different cultures. Hot and cold cultures. I have worked in Czech Republic. So in Czech Republic, if you are walking on the street, you never, ever, ever look someone in the eye, ever. And you certainly don't smile at them. That's like a horrible thing to do. Why would you smile at them? You don't know them. Why would you smile at someone you don't know or don't trust? That's crazy. Hot and cold cultures. PEI is a very hot culture. We're warm. We talk to each other. We smile at each other. We wave on the streets. You see people pulling over, right, in the neighborhoods, pulling over to talk to each other, right? And they pull out, go around, you're fine, no big deal. That's just normal. But in some cultures, they're very cold-oriented in how they interact with people, and that's not normal. So if someone that you're recruiting is from a cold culture, and you dump them into rural PEI and expected them to have a conversation about the weather and the lobsters and that person's mother before they can check out and get their groceries, that's super stressful. Very, very hard, and they're so confused. Why are they talking to me? Why are they asking me questions? Maybe they want something from me. Does that make sense? These things all play a part in how we're helping people land well on PEI and how they're going to do whenever they move forward. I won't go through all these other cultures. There's a whole bunch of them here, but that's just an example of different types of cultures. I put Canada here for culture comparisons. You can see the numbers that Canada's ranked in under Hofstad. That's some great research. And then comparing it here to China and Ukraine, just for the fun of it. So you can see how Canada ranks differently from other cultures. So if you're working with people from Canada or from China or from Ukraine, you're going to interact with them differently and explain things differently and how things work. And I could go into that for hours, but we won't do that. All right, stress inventory. Take out your handout here. I did a stress inventory for a pretend doctor coming to PEI right here. A stress inventory is a scientifically based assessment that says how much stress is in your life and how are you reacting to it. The higher level of numbers of stress in your life means you're going to have a higher chance of getting sick. And the number one reason why people don't do well in expatriate assignments is because of the family. So the family is the number one reason why people return back to their homeland if they can't make it. Number one reason. So it's important to understand the stress test of what's going on. So I pretended I was a doctor coming from PEI, and I marked in here all of the adjustments that were happening. So basically the number of the impact score, I just put that over under this doctor's score, as if they just showed up from PEI from another country. Now I don't know if this person has recently been divorced, or if they recently gotten married, or if they have a baby coming on the way, or if there's, if someone died in their family. So that would add even more stress numbers on the very top if that were to happen. I don't know this person. Just the baseline stress of this physician coming to PEI is 504. Anything over 300 is 80% likelihood of illness in the near future. On top of that, you need to keep in mind that medical personnel have some of the higher stress level jobs when you look at the stress levels of different types of jobs out there. So you add that stress to that as well. At this point, you have a medical personnel individual who is at such a high level of stress just from the transition into a new culture, into a new country, and into a new province, that they're at such a high likelihood of illness. If you don't understand this, and if anything happens as a blip on the recruitment process, you said this happened. We promised this happened. We didn't tell them this, but it happened. Anything that you don't meet expectation-wise adds stress to this chart. So every single bit of red tape, every single bit of confusion, every single bit of I told you this, but I didn't do this, or I said this, but I didn't do that. Anything like that adds to the stress chart, and it makes it more and more difficult for a person to be able to stay in a place of health whenever they come into a new culture, a new work environment, and a place where you want them to have retention. All right, I left the best for last. The main reason that people don't stay in expat assignments is because of their family. Family problems for whatever reason, whether it's health, children, spousal, anything like that. It's the number one reason under research on why people don't actually stay. And I don't know what we're doing on PEI, but if we are not focusing on the family unit and focusing on the children, then they're going to have a really hard time staying unless they're a single person. And it still matters otherwise when they're single for other reasons. A third culture kid is a child in their developmental years who is actually raised in a culture that's not the passport culture of their family. It's a child who's raised in a culture that's different than the passport culture of their mom and dad. And a third culture kid starts taking on the environment of the new culture that they're in, but they also belong to the old culture. But because they're developing, they actually make that a part of who they are. I have 2 third culture kids at home. My husband's also a third culture kid, and my mom's a third culture kid. You never ever belong, ever. You never feel like you belong. Whereas home, you can never answer that question, and you always have this identity crisis of who am I, where am I from, why am I this, why do I like this, why don't I like that, why do my parents talk like this but I talk like that, why did they say this but I say that? It's very, very confusing. The cool thing about third culture children though is they're flexible. They can grow quickly, they learn languages more quickly, and they can settle more quickly into a new culture. But the best thing about third culture kids is they get along with each other the best. So when you pull third culture kids together, they have this deep, deep, deep connection with each other. And if you talk with a lot of third culture kids, they often will marry, their spouse is actually going to be a third culture kid because they have this immediate connection. We don't have a home, we don't know where we're from, we never belong, but we belong to each other. And it's a very, very special thing. If we're looking at doctors who are coming to PEI, what are we doing for their children who are third culture kids? They will be becoming third culture kids. They're going to have a challenge in adjusting, but they're going to adjust more quickly than their parents. They're going to become a part of PEI in a way that their parents will never become a part of PEI. They're going to feel things that their parents are never going to feel. Is there a way we can pull those kids together so that they can support each other? It's a wonderful way for retention. Another cool thing that I did in the 500 families that I helped recruit over the world were mentoring programs. So 2-year mentoring programs, the first 2 years are the hardest 2 years in a new place, the most difficult. That's when the waves of culture shock come really, really high and really, really low. And if you can't get them out of the low back into the high, they have a big chance of going home, going back to something that's comfortable. So the first 2 years mentoring program was very, very important for us to set up. And in the process of setting this up, we actually started at the very, very beginning of the recruitment cycle and did it all the way through, so the relationship was kept. Now, all of this stuff seems a little bit overwhelming because it's a lot of information, and obviously I could talk for 10 days on each of these slides. The thing that we have going for us in PEI is we love community, and we can do relationship because we're awesome at it. Everyone knows that. What do people say when they come to PEI? Everyone's so nice, right? I get stuck on the side of the road, someone just shows up, like pulls me out, it's amazing, right? Like we have so much going for us on PEI. We have a place that's healthy for people to land, we have an environment of community where we can build relationship, and if we add cultural intelligence into all of the pieces of our retention process, of our recruitment process, we're gonna help people understand why they're feeling the things that they're feeling, understand why they're feeling the stress that they're feeling, and knowing that we care about that. We want you to stay because you belong to our community. You need us, we need you, let's do this together. It's an amazing environment. We're not in a war-torn country. We're not in a third world country. People go to those places to work. People want to come to PEI, they want to live here, they want to raise a family here. We need to find people who have that similar value of that and then help them walk through the cultural adjustments that they need to go through in order to make PEI their home. Questions?
Tanya, appreciate that. Yeah, Hannah?
Thank you, Chair.
Thanks.
You're a fire hose. That's great. I've never met anybody who talks faster than I do. That's fantastic.
I told her, I'm like, I'm going to talk so fast. I'm so sorry.
No, that's great. It's just that it's really neat to meet somebody else who talks as fast as I do. There's a whole bunch of stuff in there, but one of the things that really sticks out for me is about mentoring. Mm-hmm. So I've worked really extensively on mentoring programs for business.
Yes.
And have a whole bunch of data that shows how incredibly effective mentoring is for business success.
Yes.
Because it's not about people giving things or it's about what happens when you have somebody who can explain, like you said, even down to why did somebody say that to me? Or where do I go for? Or how do I do?
Yeah.
So you spoke about your experience with that. Did you create formal, structured? Could you speak a bit about what that could look like? I think it's really,
absolutely.
It's not normally where our head goes with this kind of thing, but it's really interesting.
Yeah, we created a mentoring team that covered like all 500 families that we sent. I was there for 5 years. And the mentoring team were trained in mentoring. We had like stages set up for going through the different like processes of culture shock. And they walked through a Skype conversation with the person in another country every week. So every week they met for 30 to 60 minutes. And they they talked about how they were feeling, how they were adjusting, and then prepared them, hey, this is going to be coming, like you're really happy right now, but it's going to hit, you know? Let's wait for that to hit and let's talk through. You're not strange, you know, everything's okay. It's just culture shock that's hitting right now. So we had a whole mentoring team set up, and they did training, and they had tools and adjustment and different types of assessments that they use, but it was that relationship that's the most important part, right?
Yeah.
There's someone I can call, there's someone I can email, there's someone I can text. They're there for me. I have someone that I can talk to. And it's the same in business, right? I'm feeling lost, I'm feeling like I don't know what's going on, but there's someone I can call and they can understand what I'm going through, or at least walk through that with me. And that was the main purpose of the mentoring team.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hannah?
Thanks. As sort of a follow-on from that, you know, because when I'm hearing what you're talking about, in this case, it's about that very specific knowledge about the very specific place you are. So even within PEI, it's going to be quite different for somebody who's in Charlottetown as opposed to somebody who's in O'Leary.
Totally.
So we've had a campaign in the past, which was a marketing campaign that had like an Ask an Islander. Do you remember that one? Yeah. No. So it was actually this kind of idea. It was like but it was aimed at tourists. If you don't understand this thing, then these are the people you can ask. Chefs and farmers. Yeah. But I can imagine that there, in some ways, that we're talking about two different things with mentoring. You're talking about that process of helping people understand what's happening to them psychologically.
Yes.
But I also hear that from the cultural integration part, that there would be value in that being, here is a person or persons who are actually going to have coffee with you and explain how the co-op works.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. Yeah. No, you're exactly right. Having a community that's ready to welcome someone and they are aware, you don't have to know all the details of this, but you have to be aware and be ready to talk about it. By bringing awareness to something and not letting it just kind of be the secretive thing that you think they don't know that they're thinking it, when you talk about it, it just opens it up for that fresh, like, okay, I'm not crazy. Everything's okay, and I have a community here that they don't quite understand me, I don't quite understand them, but we're here together. And we can do this together, which is what the mentoring does.
I think my last point on that, Chair, I think what I also hear from that is that this actually needs to be structured.
Yes.
And this is not something that's done off the edge of the desk. This is a critical piece. Yeah. So it would need to be financially supported. Like, you can't ask volunteers. You can't build this completely around a volunteer function for consistency. Yeah. Just an aside to that, as an Islander by choice. Twice. Come back. It's called, we other people who are also Islanders by choice call it the Secret Handshake Club. If you don't know the secret handshake, you will never find out. So it's that barrier is you don't know that you don't know, and you don't know who to ask. And so navigating that is actually, it's not that people don't want to know. It never occurred to them that they should explain to you what the Purple House is.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
So how can you begin to ask?
Absolutely.
And that's where that value would come from. But I'm hearing sort of many more questions on that. But I think thank you very much for that piece, Nothing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Natalie?
Yeah. Thanks very much for your presentation, for your enthusiasm. I have a lot of questions for you, but I'll just ask a few and then we'll kind of go around the room here. Now, in your opinion, where do you think PEI is missing the mark in terms of our recruitment and retention efforts?
I don't know if I can answer the question because I don't know how anything works. Like, I haven't dug into all the steps.
Oh, okay.
I've just been reading the news on what's been going on for the retention challenges. So I couldn't answer. I could answer that question if I knew, but I don't have the information at this point to know.
Okay, no, that's a fair answer. Sorry, thanks, Chair. For the regions in which your organization operates, how long is the typical physician contract, and sort of can you explain some of the nature of these placements and some more details around?
Yeah, for sure. So we try to avoid 1-year contracts because 1 year you can do anything for a year, right? You can see the finish line, you can make it happen, and you don't actually adjust in a healthy way. So anything over 2 years, and we always encourage 3 years, because 3 years you actually, I'm here. Like, I'm actually here to stay. I need to go buy furniture and go figure this out, you know? In most places they learned a new language as well. So language learning, culture learning took 1 year, 2 years. Around 2 years you start to feel like, okay, I understand, I'm starting to connect, I have some relationships, I'm starting to feel like this is a little bit like home, and then after that it starts to get really good. Once you get through those culture shock phases, you start to reintegrate into the new culture.
Okay.
Natalie?
Great, thanks, Chair. Are you able to draw any parallels in terms of the international scale versus Prince Edward Island specifically? Yeah. I think I mentioned that PEI is an awesome place for people to come. Sure.
And we have to be careful that we don't make ourselves look like we're Toronto. Like, we have to be very careful not to do that. We need to be open and honest. Like, we are a rural part of the country. We have awesome things to offer, and these are the reasons that we think PEI is wonderful. And you need to find people who have those similar values as what you have here on PEI. So we have this, they want that. You know, we have a safe place for your kids. We have good education. We have no highways. So it's just, you know, it's quieter. There's so many people who want that. But we need to make sure we're not pretending we're something that we're not and saying, oh yes, we're Toronto, you know, like we have all these things and like all this stuff's happening all the time. We have awesome stuff that's happening, but it's not the same as Toronto. And internationally, people think of Toronto and they think Toronto is Canada, right? But we need to say, no, this is the narrative for PEI and find people who connect with that narrative, and that's going to be a win-win in so many ways, especially retention-wise.
Sure, and that narrative would likely change, obviously, depending on whether you're rural or urban, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Yeah.
Thank you, Natalie. Corey?
Thanks, Chair. I guess out of your presentation, what could we take from it and implement here on PEI to help?
Well, I don't know. Again, I don't know what the process looks like. I've not dug into that or had access to that. But I don't know if there's a retention plan, if there's a relationship plan for mentoring, if there's a process for cultures and understanding culture shock, walking people through that. I have no idea if that's a part of the narrative of what is happening recruitment-wise, but that matters. And it matters from, again, the very beginning. You cannot start this after people land. You have to start talking about it from the very start, or it's not going to work.
Corey?
I'm assuming you're saying like this should be part of the process, though.
If you want it to work.
Okay.
Yeah.
Corey?
Yeah, because in one case I had a doctor I had spoke to. Well, they weren't a doctor yet, but they were in the process of becoming a doctor, and they had talked to recruitment officers or whatever they're called, and one case they had forgotten their name. They had called back. Had sent an email back, I guess, a month or so after they had first been in touch with them, and they actually forgot who they were, so there's probably not too much of a plan. But no, I guess I don't really have any other questions. I was just going to make that comment, but thank you.
Trish?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you so much, Tanya, for your presentation. There's so much to think about, and recruitment and retention is one of the sort of topics that we are looking at in a few different angles in this committee over the next little while. And I think you've given us lots of questions to ask, about this entire process because it's this whole person approach, right? This, we need to realize that we are not just recruiting a person to do a job, but this is a person who has a whole life, and we need to make sure that we are helping them, engage and be a part of our communities, and that their whole life is going to be situated as comfortably as possible in this is the reality here in Prince Edward Island. One of the things I found really interesting about what you said was that PEI is a fantastic place to live, and that's so very true. And it's that empowerment approach, and how can we empower our communities? But I think my colleague makes a good point that that's going to require some resources. They can't just all go on the backs of volunteers. And I think it's at this point I feel like there's a lot of just sort of assuming that we're going to recruit doctors to the communities, and then the communities are just going to take over, and they do as much as they can, but everybody needs support. So we talked about the mentoring piece. What more could government do to support the whole community, I guess, as well, to help facilitate that process, make sure that people are as supported as possible when they get there?
Yeah. The first thing I would do is have the community be a part of it, right? Like, do this together as a community. Don't come in and say, this is our plan and you're going to do it. Like, that's never helpful. Say, let's have some groups together. Let's have some think groups and talk about this. Like, have you noticed? Have you done this? What about this? Ask really good questions and then come up with a plan. But you need to have someone who's good at mentoring, can explain mentoring and teach mentoring. Because you don't want just one person to mentor. You need lots of people to mentor. So you have that. And then you need to have someone who understands cultures and understands other cultures and PEI cultures and can help help the community talk about some of the very basic important things. What happens at, Christmas time? Do they even celebrate Christmas? If they don't, can we tell them what that is and have them over for a meal? Like, is anyone thinking about these things? I'm just thinking out loud here. But these things matter, and it's what will make or break someone staying on PEI or not. So the community has to be a part of it. I think the community voice needs to be a part of it, because they're the ones experiencing the non-retention that is happening right now. They're experiencing the negative impact of that. If they're a part of the solution, that's amazing. But if you try to tell them what to do, as a community member, I wouldn't like that. I'd be like, oh, I'm not going to help you. Like, let's do it together. Because on PEI, we have to do things together, and we do things together on PEI. That's what makes PEI so wonderful, in my opinion.
Great.
Trish?
So in your experience then, what would you say have been some of the biggest challenges that you face? And I know you've recruited to far different areas than Prince Edward Island, but what are, you've described some really positive ways that we can help support retention. What are the sort of red flags or roadblocks or things that you've come across that really make it challenging for folks?
Yeah, so I've lived in different cultures myself, so I know exactly what this is like from a personal angle, and Hannah probably does this too. So having a contact person who's safe, someone you can contact and say, like, I hate PEI today, and it's for this reason. For that person to say, it's okay, let's talk about that, I'm having trouble with this, and having someone who's safe is very, very important. Also knowing some of the basics, like where are the stores, where do you buy clothes, where do I get medicine for my kid? They might be a doctor, but they might not know which store is open till 10 p.m. for Tylenol. Things like that really, really matter. So coming up with very practical things. This is not academic. This is not like we're awesome. This is practical life stuff that we need to live our life so that we can settle somewhere and be a part of the community that we're in. And to me, that's the stuff that gets missed, right? We think so academically, we think like all this other stuff, but we don't think practically on what's impacting the family unit that's coming and what that person or persons might need. And that needs to be number one primary, or the expat assignment's not going to work and they're going to leave.
All right, thank you.
Trish?
I'll just add one more comment, Chair. I think sometimes in this process, it's easy to sort of look at numbers and are we filling all the numbers in our that we need to recruit, and did we do that, and can we check the boxes? And I think not only do we need to remember that doctors are whole people with whole families, but doctors, wherever they're going to practice, they're going to be doing valuable work and they're going to be helping people. So it's really our job to not only convince them, to come here, but to show them that we appreciate them, that we, to go that extra mile to make sure that they know that they're valued and that we want them to work here with us. And I think that that's really a big piece of what we're talking about here. They don't owe us anything, so we need to always do everything we can. And I think there's much more we can do. I think your presentation has really highlighted that. So thank you. That's it for now, Chair. Thank you.
Hannah?
Thank you, Chair, and for coming around again. It's again to follow up on a couple of things, and it's as much to make sure that we as a committee don't miss the point, but when you're talking about cultures, we need to recognize, and this is my personal experience, that somebody coming from an English-speaking country is still going to have culture shock.
Yes.
So we've talked about doing some really major recruitment efforts in Ireland and South Africa, and sometimes it's shocking that there is culture shock, so people don't prepare in the same way, or we may not see that as immigrants who need support.
Yes.
Or and so my personal experience of doing it, there's a lot of assumptions that people make that, oh well, you speak the same language, it should be fine. Right. And then going the other way for me was going to Malawi, and the most fundamental things there, it was learning about some really critical social customs that were connected to religion, basically which hand you used to touch somebody with, that nobody would ever think to explain unless they knew they needed to, because it was, you just knew. But if you did it wrong, you could literally never connect with somebody ever again. You burned your bridge forever. So this is a very different, it's really important that we talk about providing a service that is for anybody that comes, and not exclude, because we make some assumptions sometimes of what immigration looks like. The other piece around that that I think would be important for us to consider with your in the context of your thing is that we have a lot of immigration support here in theory. We have the Newcomers Association, you know, they do great things, but they do things at a certain level.
Yeah.
We're talking about a program that's to meet a very specific need that is in addition to the existing supports. So my concern would be, the easy answer is we're already doing that. They should go to newcomers who are a very busy, very resourced organization, but are meeting a very specific need that is not the same as this community engagement. It would be great if everybody who came here got this.
Absolutely.
But we're talking about a critical need first. So I think that would be really important, Chair, that we identified those two pieces that may well kind of get under the rug otherwise, I guess, is the piece from that. So again, thanks for that. Thank you, Chair.
Great. We'll go to Natalie.
Sure.
Yeah.
There's such great discussion happening here, and I don't want to get too sidetracked because I'm still trying to absorb exactly what your organization does and how much, I guess, involvement you've had in terms of the island specifically, right? So are there any recruitment strategies specifically that, as they relate to professionals in the healthcare field, that you can recommend or suggest to the committee?
There's so many, from the very initial conversation all the way through to training and retention.
Sure.
I would take up the whole entire time
Sure.
trying to talk about that. But yes, working with people from other cultures, from other countries, there are specific things you have to do in the process. And I always say, if you have only known one thing and you're working with someone who knows something that you don't understand, it's very hard if you're not trained and prepped to be able to work with someone in that way. And that is what recruitment is. It's not looking at a resume and going through references. Well, that's important. It's a relationship, and it's walking someone through a journey. And if you can't walk someone through a journey and you only do paperwork, then you're not going to end up with a good fit in the end. And often you're not going to have someone in the end. And that's often missing in international recruitment, is a relationship. And walking with someone through real life stuff and caring about them in that way, while also being professional. Like all of these things are also very professional. I'm sure many doctors who contact PEI would be shocked if you said, hey, we have a program for your children. Do you have children? Awesome. We have a program for your kids to help them adjust to PEI. I bet you very few people are doing that around the world. What kind of a way would that would put us on the top level pedestal of go to PEI to care about your kids, you know? And that's just one example for setting ourselves at a level of professionalism, but also caring that's higher than what most professional recruiters do. And it'll set ourselves apart, and people will start to come to PEI. They'll talk about it.
Do you have any suggestions? Sorry, Chair. Do you have any suggestions in terms of how we would go about establishing initial contact, like outside of a doctor reaching out to us specifically? Like, how do you suggest we, reach the international stage?
Yeah.
With a little PEI.
Yeah. I think we could do that in another conversation.
Sure.
It's so detailed, but there's so many ways you can get out there, for sure, and set yourself at a place that's attractive for people to come to. And we have it to offer. That's what's the great thing. We're not saying we don't have it and we're trying to figure out how to say it. This is actually truth. We have something amazing to offer, and they have something amazing to offer. Let's do it together.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, great. I'll just add a couple of things. So the province is looking at, within the next little while, some information just went out about taking a recruitment model and dividing that in half. Okay, allowing two separate groups to potentially recruit. What advice would you have? We're looking at the process. We're trying to make it better, so we're looking at a hybrid model for the province.
Yeah.
What advice would you give those two groups as they look at this process?
Yeah. So you've just created a challenge because you have two different groups now doing the same thing. So communication's #1 priority in recruitment. And if you say something here but don't do it here, you're destroying your recruitment process. So communication has to be fully connected in every way, shape, and form. And then you have to have this I think, this cultural understanding and mentoring model throughout the entire thing. So if you have 2 different groups doing it, it needs to flow through both groups without any hiccups. And you also have to have a way for the process to not get stuck. So you have a funnel, right? That's how recruitment works. You dump people in the top and then doctors come out the bottom, right? That's the goal. But if you have a funnel and then you have 2 organizations doing it, I don't know if it's this way or if it's this way, but they're dumping people in. If anyone's not talking to each other, if anything doesn't match up, and if anything doesn't work, if there's any holes anywhere, people are just going to fall out of the funnel and no doctors are going to come down. So I think, I have no idea, I've never looked into this, but I think you've created more challenge, and you need a really, really good leader who's going to run that thing to make sure everything's integrated fully. So there's no holes. You can't have any holes, you can't have any breaks. Everything has to be integrated, it has to flow smoothly, all communication has to work, and all the mentoring has to work in the whole entire journey. And that's a challenge.
So do you think it's easier for a doctor to recruit a doctor? Do you think it matters the profession, or does it matter, are we talking about culture, are we talking about community, are we talking about value versus profession?
So I'm going to step to the side and say it's actually a really, really good recruiter. So doctors, I call doctors, recruiting doctors, influencers. I call influencers people who can say, hey, come to PEI, it's great, I'm a doctor, you're a doctor, we understand each other, we can talk about that. When I did recruitment, I spent every single day marking up every single box in relationships. So like hundreds of phone calls, hundreds of hours on Skype, hundreds of hours processing information, hundreds of hours of pushing through paperwork. That's like intense every single day. And somebody would say, how did you recruit 500 families to Africa? A lot of work, thousands and thousands of hours, thousands of systems, thousands of processes, like all of the pieces matter. And if you have a doctor, are these doctors working, or are they doctors who aren't working anymore? I don't know about this. So if these doctors are working, so you're saying to this person, okay, so you're working full-time 65, 70 hours a week. So I also want you to recruit in a relationship a whole bunch of other doctors who are going to say like, well, what about this and how does that work, and what about this license, what about this test, what about my kids, what about the school, what about the the questions just go on and on forever. You have to have someone else who's the point person to be able to answer those questions, walk them through the journey. Otherwise you're going to burn out more doctors and they'll leave PEI, and then you're not going to help anything at that point.
Yeah, and that was kind of my next question, was what happens if the people recruiting are part of that clog get bogged down with the recruiting process? And so it sounds like it's a recruiting, like I look at it as it used to be headhunting, now it's recruiting, now we're trying to get people to the area.
Yeah.
And we're trying to say that, hey, come and work in Prince Edward Island because it's a good spot. So it's all hands on deck, but there needs to be somebody at the top of that training and recruiting people to come to Prince Edward Island for this, because it's not just doctors.
No, exactly.
It's the whole medical profession that's under a lot of stress right now.
Absolutely.
And I think it's with your message, it's feeling appreciated and making sure that people want to come here and work in our community. So, anybody? Oh, Trish?
Yes, Chair, thank you. And I just wanted to add a little bit to that discussion. So, I mean, I think, it's not just about recruiting people and convincing them to come here. We need to, as you mentioned, engage them and support them to once they get here so that they want to stay here, right? And I think that I really appreciated your framing of that as an entire continuum, because if we can't just expect that, I think it's wonderful that, the Medical Society is working on recruitment, and I look forward to finding out more about that. But I think your description was really helpful in that they are influencers and getting people into the funnel, absolutely, but we can't, that's not the end of the story, right? We need, there needs to be people who it's their job to help keep them here long term, and make sure that they're supported throughout the process of coming here, staying here, and really being connected. So, and it's really would be completely impossible for working doctors who, as you said, were 65, 70 hours a week already, to put that responsibility on them. So I think those are sort of the answers that I think we're all waiting to find out more about. What piece of the puzzle will the Medical Society be playing, and the puzzle is far bigger than the one piece of getting them here. An important piece, but you can't get the whole picture. You won't get the whole puzzle if you just got one little piece, right? So yeah, that wasn't a question. It was just a.
But it was awesome.
Natalie?
Good comments. Speaking of, again, So again, I'm just trying to go back to this retention piece. So how much of a role do you think total compensation plays in retention?
Not much.
Not much, hey?
Not much. Do you want me to say more?
Yeah, are you able to expand on that?
Yeah. So, I mean, I help people who didn't make much money go live in war-torn countries, right? So I'm kind of coming from that framework, but I totally understand the importance of good compensation and good benefits. It's 100% an HR thing that matters 100%. However, people want a good experience for themselves and for their families, and they want a good professional experience where they can grow and develop their skills. And if you can provide that, and you can provide a compensation that allows them to live, in a way where they don't have to say like, oh, I need to get a second job, or I need to do, like, if you can provide compensation that allows someone to live in a place where they need to live, and you provide all of these other benefits that are connecting to the community and the family and the lifestyle that they're looking for, if it's a win-win together, then the compensation I don't think is going to matter in the big picture. I'm not saying no compensation is helpful. I'm not saying that. But you have to make sure the compensation is good enough for them to live, the benefits are good enough to care for them, so that they can then care for our community. And it matters, but you can't stop there. You can't say, oh, we can't afford, whatever the number is compared to, if you're comparing. You can't compare. You can't compare yourself. You can say, this is what we have to offer, and we need to find someone who has a similar value of that, and it'll be a win-win, and it should not be a problem, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's good. Thanks. Yeah.
Well, it's been a great, oh, sorry, Trish?
So no, I really appreciated that question. I think it's one that we come back to a lot, right? Is the compensation piece. And I think we come from this sort of deficit narrative a lot on this, like, oh, there's no way we can possibly compete, financially with the other bigger provinces. And, there's that is true, probably to a certain extent. But it comes down to, we don't want just any doctor, anyone to come if this isn't where they want to be, right? And there are doctors out there that want to practice in our incredible, rural province with these wonderful communities and all of the great things we have to offer. Those people are out there, and those people are not going to be convinced, or swayed by only the dollar amount alone. That being said, they need to be paid a fair amount.
Absolutely.
But it's not going to be the deciding factor. And as you described, there's so many other things that go into those decisions. So it's actually a win-win if we start focusing more on these retention pieces and engaging with a doctor's whole family and making sure that we are helping them throughout that entire process. Then not only are we going to be more likely to keep doctors, we're also going to recruit doctors who are a better fit for Prince Edward Island in the first place. So I think it's a win-win. I didn't have a question, but it's a great conversations today.
Sure you agree.
Yeah. Yes.
Maybe we'll ask you one question at the end. You started off this presentation talking about a serious heart condition. Can you talk about how some specific doctors or the Prince Edward Island medical community helped you through your journey?
Yeah. Well, one of the questions I asked when I moved my kids back here this summer was if they were born with a heart condition, would they have gotten the care that I got in O'Leary? And I think the answer to that is no right now, and that's what made me reach out to people. I had Dr. Verma, and he was there in our community for my entire life until he passed away. And he was an integral part of the community. He lived down the street from me. We always watched him plant his garden. His wife was also a doctor, and she helped deliver, babies all over O'Leary. And I think that's what you're looking for. You're looking for someone who's a part of the community, and they lived and they were deeply connected and engaged. They taught O'Leary about a different culture. They were from a different culture. And we became better because of it, because diversity makes us better, right? And he was there. I was in his office probably every single week. I had pneumonia almost every single month. I was in the O'Leary Hospital almost every single week because I was so sick. The IWK, I was over there, and after I got so old, then the medical specialist came here, so I was able to go to Charlottetown and get my heart checked after college, and I still have to go get my heart checked. I don't know how or where I'm going to do that now. I moved back to PEI, but I need to get my checks happening because of my heart condition. So I had an amazing experience, and I can tell people from other countries who say like, oh, Canada has free healthcare, that's bad, right? People say that to me around the world, and I say, let me tell you my story. I was born and I should have probably died, and PEI kept me alive, and the IWK is one of the best hospitals in the world. I'm like, I lived in a great place, so no, it wasn't terrible. There are things we need to work on. There are things we need to fix. There's always things we need to fix. But when I was born in the stage of the medical system that I was in, I was treated very, very well. I don't think that would be the case today, and I would potentially be petrified if my children had heart conditions. That was the same as mine.
Corey?
So, in your opinion, doctors shouldn't be involved in the process of recruiting doctors? Should we have, is that?
Not necessarily. They need to be influencers. So I think they have a lot to say. Whenever you have someone in a professional realm who can talk to others in a professional realm, they're going to draw people in. So having doctors being a part of the recruitment process is amazing. They're influencers, but you can't expect them to do all of the work. Like I don't know what's happening, but if we're expecting just dump it on the doctors and good luck, that would be terrible, right? Because there's so many pieces to this that matter and that take a lot of intentional effort and work to make it happen. They absolutely need to be a part of it, and if they're coming to the table, that's awesome. That's wonderful. But it should not be put on their shoulders to look after the whole thing. It needs to be a partnership.
Well, on behalf of the committee, I think this was a great afternoon, and we'd like to thank you and continue to stay healthy, and we'll be watching
Thank
you
you.
recruit people all over the world in the future. So, so what we'll do is we'll take a short recess, probably about 3 minutes, and then we'll come back and finish up with the rest of our business. Thank you very much.
to go, you guys?
So moving on with the meeting, after that great presentation. So we'll just take our time, and it shouldn't take too long, just update on the committee's work plan. I know Sean's been working pretty hard, and he can correct me as I go through some of the stuff. So everybody has a copy of the work plan there. So we were trying very hard to prioritize, obviously, and I think Sean's done a great job on the first couple weeks in the job, and he's done good. So I'll just read through a couple of things, and then we'll move on from there. So the update is the Seniors Health and Wellness Action Plan Implementation Council. I've had further correspondence with Catherine Freeze regarding the plan for the Seniors Health and Wellness Action Plan Implementation Council, still slated for February 19th. We haven't issued the official public notice of the meeting yet, partially because we're awaiting some additional details on who their specific presenters will be, but also because we're trying to arrange at least one other meeting before then, possibly two. And announcing the meeting in chronological sequence is less potentially confusing in terms of how the meetings are numbered. So that would be the first correspondence. And then two, we're talking about February 26th. So all have agreed to appear the Advisory Council, the Status of Women, and the Community Sector of Networks and Downtown Charlottetown, Inc.
If you want, I could speak to that, son.
Please, yeah.
Yeah, the Advisory Council on the Status of Women, the Community Sector Network, and Downtown Charlottetown Incorporated, they were all in that sort of secondary priority batch that we established a little while back. They've all agreed to come. In fact, it's looking like we might be able to see them sooner than some of our first priority batch in terms of when we get them in. February 26th has emerged as a date where two of those three would actually like to come. The Advisory Council on the Status of Women contacted me just like very shortly before this meeting started. And from the sounds of things, February 26th, out of all the dates available in February and March, is probably the only viable date for them. So if we're getting the council in the near future, February 26th would be the time to do it. It's also been mentioned that Dawn Allen for Downtown Charlottetown, that is a date that's open for her. And the Advisory Council, they've said that they would like to start at 3 o'clock if they come in for us because of availability of some of their people. So we could potentially have either Dawn Allen or somebody else in the front half of that meeting and have the Advisory Council start at 3, if that sounds good to everybody here. It might potentially bump them ahead of some of the recruitment-related presenters, but that's where that's at, if that sounds okay to everybody. Okay.
Perfect. Great, thanks a lot. So just moving on to number C, doctor, nurse, recruitment, and Kings County Memorial Hospital presenters. All invitations have gone out, and we've heard back from all potential presenters except for the Department of Health and Wellness and Health PEI reps. Tanya Renea Nace appeared today, and the PEI Nurses Union, College of Physicians and Surgeons of PEI, and the Medical Society of PEI are all interested in appearing and are trying to arrange specific dates with their respective presenters. The union and colleges both seem somewhat interested in potentially having solo dates where they are the only presenters, and the college is considering possibly doing a pure question and answer without a prepared presentation. So I'm just reading that to see how the committee feels about any of that information. Again, so that last little bit was just a Q&A with the college as they would come in and do that. So, yes, Trish?
Sorry, Chair, just to clarify, that was, okay, so the College of Physicians, they don't want to do a presentation, they just want us to come to ask some questions?
Could ask
Yes, Sean,
yeah.
please, yeah.
The college, they haven't ruled out doing a presentation, but their representative who spoke with me seemed to think it was an option they would strongly like to consider. She thinks that some of their key people might actually prefer a question and answer format.
Okay.
But she didn't lock that in. Where we left it is she said, well, we might actually do a presentation, and I gave her all of the particulars regarding everything they'd need for that, and she wasn't ruling it out. But she did say they might want to approach it Q&A style, and while most of the presenters we get here don't do that, It is something that we've seen presenters do here on occasion. Sometimes folks choose to come in and just respond to questions from the committee. So it's something that can be done, and if it's acceptable to the committee, it could remain as an option for them for when they come in.
Yeah. Trish?
Thank you, Chair. I mean, whatever is most comfortable for them, I think would be okay. I would just make sure that they know, that it is the topic we're specifically wanting to talk about is recruitment and retention, and so they have an idea of what type of questions we might ask. I suppose that's all right.
Yeah. I might add that they should maybe put together some background data prior to, just basic data around the subject, so we have a starting off point. But during if they come in with that kind of approach, we might have to prepare a few more questions to have everything ready. Okay. So, Court?
Society?
Yes, the College of Physicians.
College of Physicians and Surgeons.
Yeah.
Yeah. And again, they haven't ruled out doing a presentation. They're just saying that the person I spoke with thought that some of their people might like to do it as a pure Q&A. Whether that's what they'd pick in the end, I'm not sure, but that was something they raised.
Gord.
Corey? Oh, Heath? Thank you.
We just sat through a very practical presentation, obviously, and there's a lot of questions and no answers on from that presenter is relevant to what we could get in return from this group that comes in. I really stress that a presentation be presented to us which will evolve some of the questions that we may have, or at least answer some of the questions that we may have, which I think it'd be most beneficial as opposed to starting from scratch and just start asking Q&A. I'm not sure.
Yeah. No, good.
Sorry,
Sean?
just
Yeah.
to seek some clarification from the committee then. Would it be the committee's strong preference that they bring a prepared presentation of some kind as opposed to just a Q&A format?
Give us a direction.
I'm seeing
Well,
some
my
nodding.
only thing would be that I would like to get them in prior to us going back into the legislature in April at some time. So I would hope that wouldn't delay them getting a presentation ready. That would be my only concern. But
Sure that they can make some slideshows.
Corey, get that unanswered. Yeah. Okay. So anyway, that would be my only thing. Trish?
Yeah, I don't think it's really that big of an issue, to be honest. I mean, it is nice to sort of have a presentation and then we ask questions based on the presentation, but we know what we have a lot of questions, and I think that as long as they're comfortable, if that's more comfortable for them, I'm okay with just asking questions and having a discussion. I think it's really accommodating what they would be comfortable with, and perhaps even have the capacity and time to do, as you mentioned, we don't want to delay,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah. No, and they should be able to.
Well, actually, they have
meet
the
those
capacity,
requests.
but I meant the time.
For sure. Okay. So we'll send them something where they can we'd like to see them in, and if they can present something, just let us know what they decide to do, and this committee will enjoy their presentation or question and answer period. So, anybody else to comment on that? No? Okay, the request, smoke-free PEI, just moving on to some new, we had some requests. So smoke-free PEI approved as a committee presenter. Smoke-free PEI, they're not on our initial priority list, but they were in the system. Smoke-free PEI would prefer to appear before February 15th if possible. So if February 5th or 12th are their options, if the committee is okay with that. So we're kind of moving outside, just getting consensus. Would that be okay to have that group in, Trish?
Sure, yes, I think, if working within the, sort of first priority and then second priority people who are already invited, I would think, it's at the chair's discretion to schedule meetings during our sort of regular meeting time of Wednesday afternoons. I think we've all kind of committed to that time, so I don't think we need to,
Sure.
just a thought.
Perfect.
I'm okay with
Okay,
that.
great. Yeah, and then, so we'll move on from that. We'll schedule them in on one of those 2 dates. Mike Redmond contacted the committee and wants to present his comprehensive community plan to change the direction for many children and families living below the poverty line. So I corresponded with him just saying I would get back to the committee. we could bring this under motion number 1. He's got a lot of experience dealing with activity in children and seeing how poverty and lack of activity levels affect kids. So we'll just put it out to the committee. Hannah?
Is this as a personal, as an individual, or as a representative of Bedford McDonald House?
Well, it's in both capacities, or in the capacities that what he's done with 20 years of experience as a I asked him for further clarification too, and where is that? But it's under both. It's under his role right now of seeing people in the homeless sector, and as well as a community leader. So he has here, thank you very much for the speedy reply. I would be presenting with 25 years of youth development through coaching, programming for 1 to 3 year olds, through my work at Bedford McDonald House, the emergency hotline service, and the new community outreach center. So, Trish?
Thank you, Chair. So I know that you had sent around some email correspondence that you had with Mr. Redmond, and I mean, I guess I still have some questions about what the specific context is in terms of the like provincial, jurisdiction. What are we talking about here? Like, what is the actionable item, or what actionable items would he be looking for from the provincial government, which is really what our committee is looking at, what do we do at the provincial level? And I just would like, personally, I would like to know a little bit more about that first before we prioritize where this might fit, or if it is even a fit for this particular committee.
Yeah. So, and that's great. That's why we're having this discussion. So what we'll do is I'll correspond back with him, maybe through Sean.
If I mean,
and Hannah,
No, I just add to that given our priorities, and is what we're trying to achieve, I'm looking at sort of what he had suggested he'd present on, and obviously I appreciate the context, but we've had some significant data from those who I would consider the experts in the field, including the public health officer and her staff who actually do have the data on trends and community needs. So I understand his enthusiasm to want to come forward with it, but in terms of priority, the priority was to hear from those who actually have the full provincial data, because that's what we can use to make recommendations to your original motion. And then the other piece is that we also identified the retention and recruitment of doctors as a priority. So, should Mr. Redmond be coming to present, that context needs to be there, that this is his personal opinion, and then, or advocacy, and then I'm not sure how that would fit into our priority in terms of what we're trying to achieve to the original motion and to the function of the committee.
Okay.
But, again, I'd like to see us focusing on the priorities that were identified as priorities first, and appreciate the opportunity.
Right. Anybody else want to speak to that? So maybe we'll correspond with him. We'll ask him if he can, first of all, clarify, and then maybe, I'm not sure, those were two different kind of...
I don't know how others feel. I have no problem finding out more information from my point of view, but that would be a first step for me personally to want to move forward with this. So maybe if you can reach out in that way, and we can bring it back next time to revisit.
Yep.
And then look at it again.
Yeah. See if it fits.
Okay. So we'll do that for sure. So we'll send a correspondence with him, and we'll touch base with you probably next week if I get back to him. Thanks a lot. So Don Allen was the last. Don Allen of downtown Chardonnay has suggested February 26th as a date where she could appear if the committee approved, depending on how the schedule works out. This might not be.
Yeah, it sounds like earlier actually folks were open to having Don Allen and status of women in on the same day. Some of the notes here actually don't have the status of women because again they contacted me just before I came here, so not all of the paperwork reflects that. But the 26th, it seems like we can probably slot both of those groups that day.
Sure. Okay, so is that okay with everybody? Great. And moving on, the letter to Health and Wellness, Health PEI officials regarding the South Shore request. A lot has happened since the last committee meeting, since that time, but what this committee's done is I've included a draft of the letter to be sent to the relevant officials on the topic. The committee can confirm whether the text and chosen recipients are satisfactory and whether an additional or modifications may be required before it's sent out. So I think you all have a copy of that. Yeah. this letter is open to discussion at this point, or modifications in any way the committee sees fit. Trish?
Thank you, Chair. No, I'm in support of this letter. In particular, I like the very clear summary that was provided by the group, and I like that that's highlighted here, the 2 key points. So 2 nurse practitioners and based in Crapo, and a doctor committed to community as well. Except I would just say that they want the doctor also in Crapo, not just committed to the community, because that was one of the possible concerns, is that a doctor might be asked to cover those patients but be based out of Cornwall. So perhaps just shift that language a little bit, that the doctor be based in Crapo.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
They can,
Because doctor committed to the community and doctor based in the community is a little, the wording is, it's just a slight difference.
yeah, exactly. They can choose to live wherever they want, but they have to be 100% committed to the Crapo area for their work purposes.
We want them there, not just committed to, because that was one of the things I brought up, right, is that the doctor might be placed in Cornwall and be taking care of Crapo patients, and that's not what the community wants. They want them in the...
No, exactly.
Yeah, so just make sure that wording reflects that.
Perfect.
Otherwise, I'm in support.
Okay, did you get that?
I did.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anybody else want to comment on the letter? Anything? No? Okay, thank you for that modification. We're getting close to the end here. The Dorian research, we sent some material out yesterday that went to the Public Accounts Committee. It was the RFP for Dorian. There's some things in there. This is open to discussion. Obviously, this committee has been trying to get somebody in to talk about what happened after the storm, and now this report kind of says that it's going out to a company to have a look at it. It's going to cost almost $62,000 for that report, and it's going to be done by July 17th, okay? So that means that we're going to wait for that. We're going to wait till at least July to get any kind of data back to this committee from government members or this consultation group. So just opening it out there if this is okay with the committee, or would you like to proceed in any other way or see anybody before then? Because it'd be approaching a year almost. Yes, Trish.
Thank you, Chair. I wonder if we might have, 1 week or, for our next, bring this up again at our next meeting, because I would like to take a look at this. I want to see what the scope of the RFP is, what the report will actually cover. And I haven't had a chance to look through this entire document at this point, so I don't know if others have, but I'd like to skim, have a good look through it in a little more detail. And at that point, because of the timelines, yes, that is concerning, but I'm also, I'd like to have a look and see if I have any questions or thoughts about the RFP itself and the way it's framed.
Okay, perfect. So that's a good suggestion. Would anybody else like to speak to this? You've had a look at
Chair?
Hannah?
I would just add that despite our best intentions in terms of that we'd like to have people come to speak to us, given that this process is happening, I think we need to be realistic that it's unlikely that government would respond to come because there is a process ongoing. They would just look to this process. Yeah. It's up to others to make a decision on how they feel about that, but I think that we do need to keep in mind that continuing to push back against that, while it's our job, yeah. There may be other routes and where we can hold government to account on this rather than trying to compel witnesses to this committee at this time.
Yeah. Okay.
And that we have the legislature, this may end up being in the legislature instead. Because yeah. I expect the response is going to be, there's a process in place.
Yeah. Oh,
yeah. But we can see how we feel about that next week.
Exactly, next week. So yeah, anybody else? No? Okay. So we'll leave it that. We'll put it back on the agenda for next week, and we'll have a discussion about that document if we so choose. Sure. Corey?
I'm just curious, how many, we have this committee.
Yeah.
It was at Public Accounts yesterday, and then I think it's also on my committee I chair, Natural Resources and Environment. Are we just going to discuss it at every committee meeting now? Is it? I guess I don't, is there one committee that it should be at, or
It should be at this committee. In our mandate, this committee is responsible for justice and public safety, emergency measures. It's right in the outline of the committee, so it definitely has a scope in this committee. Financially, it would have a scope in public accounts, so, and then natural resources as well, I do believe, so, yeah. This committee for sure, it should be, the people should be in to talk about this. I do believe this committee would take priority for what happened. Excellent. So following that, it's we're almost there. New business. Would any committee members have new business to bring up at this time? No. Corey?
I don't know if it's something that, it just kind of came to mind that the committee would be interested in looking at, but the Canada Games Committee, I don't know if that would, I think that would fall under this committee.
Yeah, sport.
I guess, I don't know if there's any appetite to, you know, and this might not be something until later on because there's quite a bit on the work plan, but just to see what their plans are in terms of, you know, are the games going to be spread out across the island? Is it just going to be centered in like Summerside, Charlottetown, or just to see?
I think that's a very reasonable.
You know, they can just present what their plans are and what it's going to look like, or.
Yeah, I think that's excellent. Is anybody else? That sounds like. I mean, there's been some information on finances out about that, and I think it's a very positive thing for Prince Edward Island. And we should find out some more.
I'm just more worried that the rural areas might get forgotten about.
Sure.
It's usually.
Yeah. So at that note, I might ask Sean to maybe get a letter drafted and talk about putting that on the agenda for after the legislative sitting, if we possibly can. But that's open to debate. It's open to Trish?
Yeah, I think we can certainly add this to the list of other topics that, you know, we still need to be prioritized and keep that on our radar. But we do need to have a discussion at some point about what, you know, order we would prioritize the rest of the topics that we haven't invited people for yet. It seems like we still have enough, though, for the next little bit, that with the recruitment and retention and then the people who have already been invited at this point, is my sense, before we need to worry about that. But let's not forget it.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I think future planning is great, and this is what new business is for, to bring up new business to bring us forward into the summer months and the fall, for sure. I think that's a great suggestion. So, yeah, thanks a lot for your comments, for sure. Chair. Court?
You know, as chair, you decide, you know, schedule the meetings and whatnot, and if they can come in before the legislature sits, that's great. If not, I understand, like, it's quite a busy work plan, but if a time opens up that they can present, that's great.
Okay, so we will, I mean, there's two conflicting views about that. I would let Trish debate right now.
No, I don't want to debate. We'll have a discussion about it. So, I think, you know, I've noted a couple of other topics here that we have already identified. So social assistance changes and the electronic medical record system that were brought up a couple weeks ago. And I think that those two are sort of third priority after recruitment and retention, those who are already invited, and then those would be the two I would put as next priority. And but I don't know how others feel about that. If we're starting to have that discussion over having people come in as soon as possible after those sort of two priority groups, then I would like to suggest that those two would be the next priorities to invite.
So the medical records?
Yeah, electronic medical records and the social assistance changes, Minister of Social Development and Housing, and Annabelle.
Perfect. Yeah. Well, we can,
That's right.
it's great that you're suggesting that. And anybody else? Anybody else this time under new business?
What about the emergency room in Kings County?
Emergency room in Kings County, Sean?
They haven't responded yet,
I
have
can
they?
speak to that a little. Letters have gone out to officials from the department and Health PEI In some cases, I can verify the email's been opened, according to GroupWise, but I haven't heard anything back specifically from those yet.
Okay.
So I'll let the committee know more when I know more. In the meantime, I might try reaching out to some additional related officials in Health PEI or the department who have some connection with the topic, see if we get some bites. But right now, we haven't had responses.
When did you send those emails?
It varies a bit. Most of them went out about a week ago or more, but one of them went out a bit later, partly because we'd been mistakenly given the wrong name for one person, so that one's just within the last few days that the first letter went out for that. But again, none of the Health PEI or Department of Health are things where we've gotten responses from those groups at this time. We have, for the recruitment file, gotten responses from the Medical Society, the College of Physicians, the Nurses Union. Basically, everybody else in that first priority batch has had some kind of contact with us. But we haven't heard back from the department or Health PEI at this time.
Not,
No.
sorry.
Court?
Sure. Not even like a thanks for the email, we'll get back to you.
No, not at this time. Again, it does seem that the mail's been opened by at least some of those recipients, but I haven't heard anything further about it. They could be deciding amongst themselves who to take care of it or how to schedule it, I don't know, but I haven't heard anything specific at this time.
Okay. I think it was Heath.
Heath?
Just curious on that, when we do letters to, so did we do the letter to Health PEI or individuals for response? Just curious.
Yeah, it varies a bit case by case for this, partly because of how the committee phrased it when this was originally put forth. The minister was included in each of these because he was practically the only person mentioned specifically when this came to committee before. And beyond that, the committee had said people responsible for recruitment and retention was the phrase that came up once or twice. And through websites for Health PEI, for the department, I'd found a number of folks who are connected specifically to that topic. I believe there's a recruitment and retention secretariat or something to that effect. I had sent out, will be sending out for some of this word to a few of them specifically about that, but like I was saying, I could look for more and additional people beyond the folks I've already reached out to see if we could get a return. This, by the way, is for the recruitment topic. It's also for the Kings County Hospital. Stuff's gone out to both the department and Health PEI, at least some people from each. And I haven't heard anything specific yet. Though again, we'd actually sent something to the wrong person for one of the Health PEI folks at first. That's since been corrected. So that's reached that person a little later. What's that?
At least they responded.
Would you like me to follow up with a call to some of those people? Or how would you? Oh, sorry, Heath. Yes, you have the floor.
I was just wondering if we couldn't do a formal letter to the minister and maybe to Denise Fleming stating that we've provided letters
Yeah.
and hoping to get at least a response that they confirm they got the letters in all cases.
Yeah.
I think that kind of starts at the top and then let them
Yeah.
pinpoint as us chasing the dog's tail.
It's a great suggestion. Would the committee be in favor of writing such a letter? Yeah, great. So let it be written.
Thank you, clerk.
Yeah.
New episode coming out this evening.
Anybody out? We're talking about new business, so we've got your suggestions. We've got Corey's suggestions, and this is the time to bring those things up. And I mean, all the issues are important. We do have 3 motions that we have to begin to look at too as well, that have been put from the legislative assembly here too as well. But right now we've got a lot to work on, and I mean, continue to have that open discussion with myself or Sean at any time, and you guys are really the keys to this committee. So I appreciate the engagement.
Chair?
Hannah?
On that note, Chair, thank you, Chair. Can we, we've done in a couple of other committees, we've begun to have the conversation about knowing that we're only 8 weeks away from going back into
Yeah.
the ledge, to thinking about getting ready for that and what, if anything, we want to bring back to that,
Yeah.
to that space.
Yeah.
So perhaps for our next meeting, could we have a discussion about, what are the deliverables that we'd like to try and bring back?
Absolutely.
Even on a general basis. Obviously, I know our report discussion happens in camera, but it would be good for us just to
Yeah.
maybe have a small in-camera session where we
Sure.
could have that conversation.
Sure.
Because I think that would really help us in terms of sort of knowing, we have done a huge amount of work here and a lot of listening.
Yeah.
It would be really good to know sort of what we're trying to move forward.
Yeah, exactly. So that's a great suggestion. So part of potentially, it won't be as long next week with going through this. So what we'll do is part of next week's meeting, we'll go in camera. And two, we had a shift of clerks too as well. So we'll try to accumulate all that data and try to come up with some discussion points and moving forward with some good recommendations to the ledge.
Great.
Sean?
One point of clarification just regarding the letter we referred to earlier. It said we'll be sending that out to the minister and to Denise Lewis Fleming.
Or,
And-
I should say, could be the deputy, I guess, too.
Oh, could be the
CEO or
deputy.
Mark Spadell?
Should I go with the deputy as opposed to,
I would think so, yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
minister and the deputy, and this would be a collective letter in regards to both the recruitment retention topic and Kings County. Does that make sense to everybody?
Sure.
Yeah.
Response would be nice.
Yes.
Okay.
We remind you that the committee requests your attendance. We respectfully remind you.
It's good your mic's not on.
I second.
Okay. We're still on record here, so I think would that be conclude new business? Yeah. Could I get a motion to adjourn this meeting? Keith McDonald? So this meeting is adjourned.